Good morning to everyone. Nice to see everyone this morning. It's been quite some time, but we're going to get back to the book of Revelation. We're going to continue on our journey, and I'm sorry for the delay, but hopefully we'll make up for some lost time here. Remember that these sermons are being brought to you from the Church of God Seventh Day with headquarters in Salem, West Virginia. If you would like any more information, free magazine, free tracts, free quarterlies, just contact us there in Salem. Last time we had gotten into Revelation chapter 12. We're going to continue in 13, and I just want to do a little bit of a review of 12 to kind of bring us up to date. Remember that if we go to Revelation 12, we're going to look at verse 3. And it talked about the fact that there appeared another wonder in heaven, and behold, a great red dragon, having 7 heads and 10 horns and 7 crowns upon his heads. Remember, this is Satan, of course, and I think I remarked to you that Satan is really the power behind the throne. Satan, remember the conversation that he had with Christ when he was tempting Christ. He was saying to Christ, he said, if you would bow down and worship me, I'll give you all the kingdoms. I'll give you all the power. I'll give you everything. And it was almost like, this is kind of like a weird conversation, because how can he do this? Well, because he is really in charge of this particular realm here, like at this time, in a sense, with the power behind, like I said, behind the throne. And so he was able to offer that to Christ. Keep in mind, this is temptation. This is temptation not only to Christ, but this is temptation to us. People want power and glory and fame and all these different things. We see this every week on some of these reality shows, in a sense. That's what people are trying to do. A lot of people have, in a sense, sold their souls for these things. So this is really just an example. Christ was being offered like everything. And of course, because he was strong enough and because he realized that there was really more, that there was really more than what he was offering, of course turns him down, because he tells him that this is not it. And he answered all of his temptations, all of Satan's tries, with Scripture. Okay? Anyway, so we learn that Satan is behind the powers that be. And the other thing I wanted to point out to you at this particular time is, and we're going to look into it a little bit later, and that's Daniel. Remember the conversation that took place between Daniel and Nebuchadnezzar. It's amazing to me how God uses his people to speak with, to deal with the so-called, most powerful men on the earth at that particular time, whatever it was. When you go back to Moses and Pharaoh, and you go back to, Daniel and Nebuchadnezzar. But if we were standing next to Daniel, and we were overhearing the conversation that they were having, we would call that current events, because it would be taking place at that particular time, and Daniel would be telling, Nebuchadnezzar, Nebuchadnezzar, you're that head of gold. And then he talks to Nebuchadnezzar about things in the future. And of course, we call that prophecy. And we're here today discussing those things that happened in the past, and of course, those things have become history. So it was current events, prophecy has become history. And we're standing here talking about it now, pretty much like some of the things that we're going to look at in Revelation. If we were with John on the Isle of Patmos, it would be current events. But he would be telling us about things that were going to take place in the future. Some of those things, the prophecies that John has given us, have really become history. And that's kind of where we find ourselves today. We're in between some of those prophecies that have become history, looking forward to some of the prophecies that he talked about or wrote about at that particular time. All right, and of course, the end of Revelation 12, where it talks about, and the dragon, remember dragon, the devil, right, was wroth with the woman, this would be the church, and went to make war with the remnant of her seed. And why was he doing that? It says, because which keep the commandments of God and have the testimony of Jesus Christ. So this is a body of people who are trying to live the way that God wants them to live and do the things that they are supposed to be doing, and they are witnessing to the life of Christ. They are witnessing about God and his Son, Jesus Christ. Okay? All right. Now, we go into chapter 13, and I have a little heading that says, the beast out of the sea. 13:1, and I stood upon the sand of the sea and saw a beast rise up out of the sea. Now, when you see that, when you read this, it's talking about coming up from the people. Okay? So this is a sea of people. And of course, it says, having 7 heads and 10 horns, and upon his horns 10 crowns, and upon the heads the names of blasphemy. And then, of course, it goes on to say, and the beast which I saw was like unto a leopard, and his feet were as the feet of a bear, and his mouth as the mouth of a lion. And the dragon gave him power, and he sat, and his seat, and great authority. And I saw one of his heads as it were wounded to death, and his deadly wound was healed, and all the world wondered after the beast. And they worshipped the dragon, which gave power unto the beast, and they worshipped the beast, saying, who is like unto the beast, and who is able to make war with him? And there was given unto him a mouth speaking great things, and blasphemies, and power was given unto him to continue 42 months. And of course that equates to 1260 years. Now I'll back up a little bit here. What had happened at that particular time? Well, remember that Rome is a different kind of power. Rome has become now involved with religion. When we get to Constantine, Constantine uses another method to try to bring more people into the realm, into the power and the the glory and the neighborhood, I guess, of Rome. And he does so by using religion. And what he does is he tries to incorporate some of the things that the pagans and the heathens and the the Romans, in a sense, did, and kind of give them a new name. And so therefore we come up with Christmas, and we come up with the Trinity, we come up with Sunday keeping, and some of these different things that have taken place down through history to try to have more people embrace the teachings of Rome. Now we look at it and we see that Rome as a power seems not to exist. Of course, it doesn't have the power that it had in those particular days, going back in the early parts of the time of Christ, because Rome was really in its heyday at that particular time, and stayed that way for a number of years. As Rome started to break down, the Rome itself broke into 10 different little kingdoms. But as I told you the last time, 3 of those kingdoms were what we would call Arian kingdoms. And so they didn't readily accept, Constantine and this new concept of a pope, like a religious leader. And there were battles that took place, and you can look this up historically. I think the fellow's name was Justinian, believed that the Pope should reign supreme, as it were. And so he went and he defeated, I believe it was the last two of the three Arian kingdoms, and he established the Pope in his place, as it were. And that occurred in 538 AD. And so when you look back historically and you find that out, and you add the 1260 years, it brings you to 1798. And at 1798, what happened was Napoleon, who is now a conqueror, as it were, has his General Berthier, go into Rome and arrest the Pope. If you study some of the history, the popes had a lot of religious power and political power. So it seems at that particular time that the Pope has lost his political power. Yes, he's the religious head of an organization, but he doesn't quite have the political power that he used to have. Now, kind of put that aside a little bit. But he's still this religious leader. And of course, keep in mind also that in 1798, the United States was just like a fledgling new country. But the United States was founded on, some of these principles, which include, our freedom, the Bill of Rights, which gives us the freedom of religion. And of course, there wasn't supposed to be what we would call a state-run religion. And that was probably the biggest problem that a lot of folks ran into over in Europe, because there were countries that were run, they were religious countries. If the leader of the country was Catholic, you had to be Catholic if you wanted to stay there. If you were going to be, a part of Rome in a sense, you had to give your allegiance to, it would be to the Pope. And of course, when Henry did what he did, he made himself the head of a new religion. Now you have Anglican Church, and of course the king at that particular time, Henry, was the head of the church, and and he really wanted people to follow him, as it were. And so you had all these things going on where people weren't really free. And so they could come to the United States and practice, not that we would agree with all the religions that came here, but, they were free to practice their religion. So when you go back here to, 12 and 6, we're talking about, keep in mind this would be like the Pope, right? And he opened his mouth in blasphemy against God, to blaspheme his name and his tabernacle and them that dwell in heaven. And it was given unto him to make war with the saints and to overcome them. And power was given him over all kindreds and tongues and nations. And all that dwell upon the earth shall worship him, whose names are not written in the book of life of the Lamb slain from the foundation of the world. So again, if you are a saint, if you are trying to practice what you believe God wants you to do, your name should be written in the book of life, of course, and you should not worship in this or, that system. This is not for you and I. Because this system, the Roman system, the religious system, is incorporating many of the things from the old Babylonian days. And so Rome has really incorporated some of the Babylonian teachings and some of the Babylonian gods, in a sense, and just really started to call them by different names. And that's what this is really all about. So again, in 8 it says, and all that dwell upon the earth shall worship him, whose names are not written in the book of life. So if your name's in the book of life, you're not going to worship him. And then, of course, in 9 it says, if any man have an ear, let him hear. And this is very important. This is the message that we're trying to give out to people. We're trying to tell people, don't do this. Don't follow this way. This is wrong. You need to investigate and look into these things, because what we're trying to tell you is the truth and the way we're supposed to be living and what we're supposed to be doing. And then in 10 it says, he that leadeth into captivity shall go into captivity. He that killeth with the sword must be killed with the sword. Here is the patience and the faith of the saints. Okay? So we have to be aware of what's out there. Now, here we have another beast. And I think I'm going to kind of suggest something here, because I'm not positively absolutely sure, but it seems, I'm pretty confident about what we're talking about here. But in verse 11, it says, I beheld another beast coming up out of the earth, and he had 2 horns like a lamb, and he spake as a dragon. Now, a couple of things have changed right now. Number one, we have, in the first time in about 600 years, we have 2 popes. Of course, they'll call the one guy the Pope Emeritus. But we have 2 popes, and he turns around and he says, the former, the one that just kind of retired, he says that God visited him, God told him, and of course, when you start throwing those things around, when you start saying God, visited me, or I had a vision, or using some of these different things, people start thinking you have this special connection. Okay? If I started doing that, maybe not to you folks, okay, but some other folks might think, oh boy, he's got this contact. And so this Pope comes out and says, well, God told him, God visited him, and, he had this revelation, and of course, he should step aside. So now what happens? All right. We have a new Pope that's in the paper. It's almost, every day, every other day. I mean, he's saying something, they're quoting it, they're writing it, they're applauding him, they're praising him, he's like the people's Pope. They show you what kind of, he chooses not to live in opulence, of course. He's just got this, bare bones bedroom, and he drives a secondhand car, and he doesn't want to do this, and he doesn't want to do that. He's kind of more into, he's into the people, right? But if you look at this, in 11 it says, and I beheld another beast coming up out of the earth, and he had 2 horns. Now, one of those horns is like a lamb. So we can look at this new Pope, and we can say, he's a gentle soul, he's a humble soul, he cares about the people, and of course he's a religious leader. But don't ever forget the fact that he is the head of one of the most, one of the richest, most powerful organizations on the face of the earth. I mean, don't ever forget that. When we said before that the Pope was arrested and he was locked up and he lost his political power. Well, I don't know the exact date, but when the Vatican itself became a country, and I think that happened under Mussolini, I believe. I might be incorrect on that, but I thought it was under Mussolini. The Vatican is a little country, and I think it coins its own money, it has its own government, and of course the Pope is the head of both. And he oversees Vatican City, and he's of course the head of the church. And the Vatican is very powerful. The Pope has always used what we would call emissaries and ambassadors. And of course they report directly back to him. And don't ever forget the power of the so-called confessional. Everything gets funneled back to, Papa. So these people that are out in the world are like his, CIA in a sense, that report back to him. And so he keeps his fingers on the pulse of everything that's going on around the world. And don't think that they're not involved politically, because they are. You've got some of the most powerful men. I remember I was just writing this in an email to someone, and I said that one of the most powerful men in New York when we were growing up was Francis Cardinal Spellman. I mean, it was almost like there was nothing that happened in New York that didn't happen that he wasn't involved with. And, you know, in Chicago, there was I can't remember his name, but there was another cardinal. And in Boston, there was another cardinal who was deeply involved with the Kennedy family. You know, and so these people have got themselves in these powerful central positions around the world. And of course, they report back to this man. They report back to the Pope. Now, I think the thing that you have to understand here is I believe what we're seeing is the reemergence of this position as a religious and political power. And so when you look at this verse 11, it says, "And I beheld another beast coming up out of the earth, and he had two horns like a lamb." So we could say that's the religious side. "And he spake like" what? "As a dragon." Right? So what do we have? What do we have associated with the dragon? Well, if you go back to 12:3, of course, it talks about Satan, the great red dragon, being behind the powers of the political world. And of course, now we have this beast coming up out of the earth from among the people, and he had two horns like a lamb, and he spake like a dragon. So everything that this guy is saying, everything that he's writing, everything that they're talking about, he's being reported on all the time. Right? And it says then, "And he exercised," this is verse 12, "and he exerciseth all the power of the first beast before him, and causeth the earth and them that which dwell therein to worship the first beast, whose deadly wound was healed." So there's a reemergence, and again, and I think this is very subtle. We've always talked about the fact that we do live under the Roman system, even though the Roman empire does not exist. It still has great influence in our daily life, whether we look at the clock or we look at the calendar or, the days of the week, the planets. They have different names that have been named by like the Roman system. And of course, Constantine changed the day of worship from Saturday to Sunday. And and people flock after that. They don't even know what they're doing. They think that they're doing right, but yet they're following the dictates of this, this Roman system. Right? So I think what we're seeing is kind of like a reemergence. He's supposed to be. He's looking into things. He's going to change things. He's taking care of some of the problems, and I mean, it remains to be seen. Some of the things are just hype, I think. In 13 it says, "And he doeth great wonders, so that he maketh fire come down from heaven and on earth in the sight of men." So this is something we haven't seen, but who knows? I mean, they're making saints all the time. They're claiming all these miracles. They're claiming different things happen. And of course, it's like they slap each other on the back, and they just make each other saints as they go along. I mean, they're already talking about making John Paul II. I guess John Paul the Great or whatever it is. They've claimed he's already performed so many miracles. And he's on the fast track. He's on the fast track. And then 15 it says, "And he had power to give life unto the image of the beast, that the image of the beast should both speak and cause that as many as would not worship the image of the beast should be killed." So again, here we have a situation. I think we see the emergence of not the Roman Empire so much, but the Roman religion. People, they're trying to get other religions to come back into the fold, as it were. Keep in mind that their attitude is that we're all Catholics, that or I should say, we all belong to the Catholic Church. You and I have just gone astray temporarily, but we should come back to the fold. That's where we should be. 16. And he causeth all, both small and great, rich and poor, free and bond, to receive a mark in their right hand or in their foreheads, that no man might buy or sell, save he that had the mark or the name of the beast or the number of his name. And of course, we've always looked at that. It's not a literal mark. It's not like a tattoo. It's not. It's like what you think is what you do. What you think is what you cause your hand to do. How you think about work, when you work, what you do. This is kind of what you and I are identified by what we do or don't do. And so therefore we are marked by our actions. We are marked by the way we live. We are identified by what we do. And then of course in 18 it says, here is wisdom, let him that hath understanding count the number of the beast, for it is the number of a man, and his number is 666 and 6. And of course, that identifies Rome. I mean, if you know your Roman numerals, the Roman numerals add up to 666. I was reading something earlier where it talked about the fact that I think it was Hebrew and Aramaic did not have a numbering system. They only had a letter system. They didn't have a numbering system. So when you talk about a number, it has to be another system. And of course, we believe it's the Roman system. When you go into chapter 14, we have a few more minutes here. It says, and I looked, and lo, the Lamb stood on Mount Zion, and with him the 144,000. Of course, we talked about that before. We identified the 144,000. 144,000 are 12,000 from each tribe. Those are Israelites. They are they've already been accounted for. We know that there are other religions that think that, there's still some of the 144,000 alive, I assume, and they believe that they're, on this earth today. Not all. But anyway, there's different thoughts here, but the Bible teaches us that the 144,000 is 12,000 from each tribe. And of course, it says, having his father's name written in their foreheads. And I heard a voice from heaven as the voice of many waters, and as the voice of great thunder, and I heard the voice of harpers harping with their harps. And they sung, as it were, a new song before the throne and before the four beasts and the elders. And no man could learn that song but the 144,000. So these people are in a special category. Everybody can't fall into this category. And so the category here has got to be, from the tribes of Israel. Nobody else knows this song, right? It talks about the fact that they were redeemed. It says, no man could learn that song but the 144,000, which were redeemed from the earth. And of course it says, these are they which were not defiled with women. In other words, false religion. They didn't follow false religion. They believed their teachings. They followed God. And even when Jesus came upon the scene, what they did, of course, was they started to understand who and what he was and what he did, what he came to accomplish. And it says, for they are virgins. They didn't get involved with false religion. These are they which follow the Lamb whithersoever he goeth. These were redeemed from among men, being the first fruits unto God and to the Lamb. So the first fruits would be Israel. That's who the first fruits would be, Israel. Gentiles can't be among the 144,000. It just doesn't make any sense. And then we get into the everlasting gospel. 6 talks about, and I saw another angel fly in the midst of heaven, having the everlasting gospel to preach unto them that dwell on the earth, and to every nation and kindred and tongue and people, saying in a loud voice, fear God, and give glory to him, for the hour of his judgment is come, and worship him that made heaven and earth, and the sea, and the fountains of waters. And there followed another angel, saying, Babylon is fallen, that great city, because she made all the nations drink of the wine of the wrath of fornication. And it's the idea, I think you have to keep in mind that Babylon has also fallen in the sense that it has become more and more and more depraved. It has become more and more involved with false teachings. It has gotten worse. It's almost like it can't come back the right way, in a sense. It can't ever become a good religion, in a sense. It's just had gotten so far down and so far away from anything that we should be doing. And what we're trying to do at this particular time is tell people about that. And we try to tell them one step at a time. We try to explain, well, say the Sabbath was changed. Christmas is really a false holiday. The resurrection didn't happen on a Sunday. There is an indication in Scripture that we should be eating certain foods and not eating other foods. And we try to tell people, we try to explain to them, don't accept some of the teachings that are out there. But we have little success. It's unfortunate because Christ spent years trying to tell people, performing miracles, giving them food, being with them, living among them. And yet there weren't that many converts, as it were, until after he left. People saw him more after, I guess, in a sense. I hope that's not the case. People will have to go through the plagues. And we're trying to tell them the truth. We're trying to protect them and help them and guide them through those things so that they don't have to go through the plagues. 9 says, and the third angel followed them, saying in a loud voice, if any man worship the beast in his image and receive his mark in his forehead or in his hand, the same shall drink of the wine of the wrath of God, which is poured out without mixture into the cup of his indignation, and he shall be tormented with fire and brimstone in the presence of the holy angels and in the presence of the Lamb. Of course, what we're talking about here is the fact that we're trying to keep people from doing these things because we know what's going to happen. And it tells us right here in the Word of God what will happen to them. And of course in 12 it says, here is the patience of the saints. Here are they that keep the commandments of God and the faith of Jesus. Okay? Because we will not get involved. We will not do the things that we're not supposed to do. We will believe God. We will talk about Him as the Creator. We will talk about His Son and the plan of salvation. And we will do the things that, we will do, we're supposed to do. In 13 it says, and I heard a voice from heaven saying unto me, write, blessed are the dead which die in the Lord from henceforth. Yea, saith the Spirit, that they may rest from their labors, and their works do follow them. And of course, we get into, this is a vision of Armageddon. It says, and I looked, and behold a white cloud, and upon the cloud one sat like the Son of Man, having on his head a golden crown, and in his hand a sharp sickle. And another angel came out of the temple, crying with a loud voice to him that sat on the cloud, thrust in thy sickle and reap, for the time is come for thee to reap. For the harvest of the earth is ripe. And he that sat on the cloud thrust in his sickle on the earth, and the earth was reaped. Now kind of make a notation there that would be the reaping of the saints. That's what that would be, right? This is a vision. It's kind of a note, a vision within a vision in a sense. He's saying, and then he says, and another angel, so we have the Son of Man reaping, but it says, and another angel come out of the temple which was in heaven, he also having a sharp sickle. And another angel came out from the altar which had power over fire, and cried with a loud cry to him that had the sharp sickle, saying, Thrust in thy sickle, their sharp sickle, and gather the clusters of the vine of the earth, for the grapes are fully ripe. And the angel thrust in his sickle into the earth, and gathered the vine of the earth, and cast it into the great winepress of the wrath of God. And the winepress was trodden without the city, and blood came out of the winepress, even unto the horse's bridle, by the space of 1,600 furlongs. So again, this would be more, you've got the reaping phase, and you have the warring phase within these 6 verses here. And so what's going to happen, of course, is there's going to be major fighting, in the valley of Armageddon. And of course, the blood, it says the blood is just going to be just so high. I mean, tremendously high. Just the devastation will just be awful. Okay? So that completes our review of 13 and 14. Next time we'll get into chapter 15. If everybody would stand.